All right, so get this. Listeners sent in a ton of stuff on Volodymyr Zelensky, and they want us to go deeper. Beyond the wartime leader, beyond the global icon, they want to know, like, what made this guy tick even before the war?
Yeah, the materials you sent are fascinating. We've got like early bios, interviews from like back when he was in entertainment, even some political analysis pieces from before the 2022 invasion.
Oh, wow. So we're going way back. This isn't just going to be like recapping the headlines. We're time traveling back to Zelensky before he was president. We're talking his childhood, his comedy career, the whole thing.
Exactly. And I think that's key to understanding his impact, right? Like, how did a comedian become a wartime leader who rallied the world? Was there something in his past that kind of maybe predicted this?
Okay, I'm into it. So rewind us all the way back. Take us to Kryvyi. It's this industrial city in Soviet Ukraine. Not exactly a glamorous start, right?
Not at all. And I mean, look, his family was educated. His father was a professor. His mother was an engineer. But this wasn't some like elite pathway to power.
Okay, so young Zelensky gets his law degree, which honestly already color me impressed. But then he veers hard into comedy. Was this like a plan B, or is this always a passion?
All sources point to it being genuine. Like, he co-founds this comedy troupe, Kvartal 95, and they become huge in Ukraine. Not just stand-up either. They're doing TV shows, films. They were like shaping the cultural landscape.
Hold on, this wasn't some niche act. They were mainstream successful. I need to find clips of this, man.
Oh, there's plenty out there. And it gets even more interesting. One of their shows, Servant of the People, Zelensky plays a teacher who ends up becoming president after this rant he gives against corruption. Like, it goes viral.
Whoa. Okay, that's giving me chills. Was this intentional? Like foreshadowing? Or just a bizarre coincidence?
Hard to say, but the show was wildly popular. It tackled issues like corruption, economic struggles, these themes that resonated with Ukrainians and would later define Zelensky's own campaign.
Talk about life imitating art, huh? But even with a hit show, going from acting out the presidency to actually running for it, that's a wild leap.
It was a gamble for sure. But in 2018, Zelensky announces his candidacy, and he actually uses the name Servant of the People for his party. He was riding that wave of popularity, no doubt.
Okay, so was this just a celebrity stunt, or did he actually have a political platform?
Oh, he had a platform focused on like anti-corruption, economic reform, ending the conflict in eastern Ukraine. It was populist, appealing to voters who were tired of the status quo.
But surely the political establishment didn't just roll over. I mean, they'd faced celebrity candidates before.
They underestimated him, big time. The incumbent, Petro Poroshenko, he had his own baggage, and Zelensky campaigned on this image of being an outsider, a man of the people.
So 2019 election night rolls around. What happens?
Landslide victory, 73% of the vote. Zelensky, the comedian, becomes President Zelensky.
Whoa, that's insane. A total outsider dismantling the establishment. What was the reaction like?
Shockwaves, globally. Here's this guy, no real political experience, upending the system. Some were hopeful, others were skeptical. Nobody knew what to expect.
And how did Zelensky handle those first few years? Was it smooth sailing?
Not exactly. He faced pushback from those entrenched interests, struggled to implement some reforms. You know, governing is a lot harder than campaigning, even with good intentions.
Right, yeah, that's a point we can't gloss over. Just because someone wins an election doesn't mean they magically fix everything.
Precisely. And for Zelensky, those early challenges, they pale in comparison to what was coming.
You're talking about February 24, 2022, the day Russia invaded. Everything changes.
From comedian to commander-in-chief, almost overnight. The world held its breath, wondering how this, like, totally unexpected leader would respond.
And his response, it was something else.
I mean, he could have fled. A lot of people expected him to, actually. But he stayed in Kyiv, and his message was, it was defiant. The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride.
Man, that quote, it went viral instantly. Like, almost overnight, Zelensky was more than just a president. He was like a symbol of resistance.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just words either. He was out there visiting troops, rallying citizens, like visibly leading his people.
So, okay, but how did he go from that to becoming this global icon, rallying international support for Ukraine? It seems like a massive jump.
Well, let's look at, for example, his address to the U.S. Congress on March 16th, 2022. He invoked Pearl Harbor, Martin Luther King Jr., appealed to American ideals.
Oh, yeah, I remember that speech. It was powerful, deeply personal. And he spoke in English, directly to the American people.
Exactly. Like, he understood his audience, their history, their values. He didn't just, like, ask for help. He framed it as a fight for shared democratic principles.
So he's using his communication skills, honed from years of performing to make this conflict relatable, to connect with people on an emotional level.
And it worked. I mean, he addressed parliaments around the world, each speech tailored to resonate with that specific audience. It was masterful.
But I'm sure there was some pushback, right? Like some people probably criticize his approach as being too theatrical, too emotional.
Oh, there were critiques for sure. Some people found his style unconventional, even manipulative. But the effectiveness, undeniable. He mobilized public opinion, which in turn put pressure on governments to provide aid to Ukraine.
It's fascinating how his background in entertainment became this unexpected asset in wartime.
Yeah.
Did this shift his image within Ukraine itself?
Hugely. Like, at pre-invasion, he had his critics. He hadn't delivered on all of his promises, and some questioned his, political acumen.
So the war, in a way, unified the country behind him.
Precisely. He became like the embodiment of their resilience. But it's important to remember, this wasn't some performance. This was real leadership in the face of an existential threat.
And all of this while his own family's in danger, his wife, Elena, their children. That must have added an immense personal weight to his decisions.
Yeah, and sources suggest that Elena played a crucial role during this time. She wasn't just the first lady. She was actively involved in strategic communications, even humanitarian efforts.
It's easy to forget that behind the headlines, there's a family going through this ordeal. It humanizes the whole conflict.
Absolutely. And it makes Zelensky's resolve even more striking. He's not just fighting for abstract ideals. He's fighting for his family's future, his nation's survival.
So we've seen the comedian, the wartime leader, the global advocate. But where does Zelensky go from here? Can he maintain this level of influence?
That is the million-dollar question. The war, it's reshaped Ukraine, reshaped global politics. Zelensky's role in the post-war world is still being written.
And, going through these materials, I'm struck by all these unexpected twists and turns. Did you know this guy won Ukraine's Dancing with the Stars?
Oh, yeah, it's true. And he voiced Paddington Bear in the Ukrainian dub. These little details, they add another dimension to the man, don't they?
Totally. It's here's this guy leading a nation at war, and he's got this playful, charismatic side, too.
It's a reminder that even in, the most serious of figures, there's complexity, humanity, and maybe that ability to connect across those boundaries. That's part of what makes him so effective.
All right, so we've got this unlikely hero, defying expectations, rallying the world. But what about the challenges, the criticisms? Were there missteps along the way?
There were definitely difficult decisions, moments where his judgment was questioned.
We're just talking about those tough calls, the times when Zelensky's judgment was questioned.
Yeah, leading a nation at war, that kind of pressure is immense. There were times when Zelensky had to, make the tough calls, authorize actions that weren't universally popular.
Can you give me an example, something specific that sparked debate?
Well, the decision to hold on to Bakhmut for as long as they did, that was controversial. Some people argued it was a strategic necessity. Others said it was a costly waste of manpower and resources.
Right, yeah. I remember that. It felt like a turning point in the media narrative. So, what does that tell us about Zelensky's leadership style?
It shows a willingness to take risks, to hold firm, even when faced with heavy losses. But it also kind of raises questions about his decision-making process, whether he's prone to digging in his heels even when a strategic retreat might be wiser.
So it's a complex picture emerging. He's not just a hero on a pedestal. He's a leader, grappling with these impossible choices, with the weight of a nation's fate on his shoulders.
Exactly. And that's what makes his story so compelling. It's not just this simple good versus evil narrative. It's a human story, full of, triumphs and setbacks, moments of brilliance and moments of doubt.
And going back to, all the materials you reviewed, what do they say about Zelensky's long-term goals for Ukraine? What's his vision for the future?
Well, even before the invasion, he campaigned on this platform of modernization, bringing Ukraine closer to the West, both economically and politically. The war, in a tragic way, has accelerated that process.
So you're saying the conflict, despite all the devastation, it might actually push Ukraine toward those very reforms that Zelensky had envisioned.
Yeah, it's a possibility. The need for reconstruction, the influx of international support, it could create an opportunity for fundamental change. If it's managed correctly, of course.
But wouldn't that depend on the outcome of the war itself?
Yeah.
If Russia, achieves its objectives, wouldn't that just derail any hope of reform.
Absolutely. Zelensky's vision, it hinges on Ukraine maintaining its sovereignty, its ability to chart its own course.
So a lot of uncertainty still hangs in the balance, but let's go back to the man himself, into those personal details that make him so relatable. What stands out to you?
Well, his humor, for one. Even in like the darkest of times, he's managed to find these moments of levity to connect with people through laughter.
You know, I read somewhere that he used to do stand-up routines in Russian.
Yeah.
Which is interesting considering, everything that's going on now.
Right. It speaks to his ability to cross those cultural boundaries, to find common ground, even with those who might be considered, adversaries.
And of course, we can't forget his entertainment background. Winning, Dancing with the Stars, voicing Paddington Bear. I mean, it's not your typical presidential resume.
But maybe those experiences, those moments in the spotlight, they prepared him for the global stage in ways that we couldn't have imagined.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this sense of awe at Zelensky's journey. From comedian to wartime leader, from like relative obscurity to global icon. It's a story that continues to unfold.
Yeah, it's a story that raises these profound questions about leadership, about resilience, about the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity.
What do you think? Like, will Zelensky be remembered as a wartime hero, a reformer, a symbol of Ukrainian resistance, or maybe all of the above?
Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. Volodymyr Zelensky has left, an indelible mark on history. His story is a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, hope, courage, and the determination to fight for what's right can prevail.
And that's a powerful message for all of us, no matter what challenges we face in our own lives. This deep dive has been a journey of discovery, and we encourage you to continue exploring to learn more about Zelensky, about Ukraine, and about the ongoing struggle for freedom and democracy in the world.